All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here. We're doing a preview and prediction for the 2022 Nebraska Cornhuskers. You know, a lot has changed since my spring preview just a couple months ago, mainly because of the ads and the losses in the portal. I think Scott Frost has done a phenomenal job in the portal. We'll get some of those ads here a little bit later, but this is his fifth season. Make or break season, Nick, for Scott Frost. 15-29 so far. Mark Whipple comes over, spent last season at Pittsburgh. He did tremendous work with that offense, mainly Kenny Pickett, who developed into a first-round pick. Eric Ender, been with Frost since 2014. He's a defensive play caller. The Cornhuskers, they lost all 9 games last fall by 9 points or less. Adrian Martinez transfers out. That's probably the top headline. And again, you know, this is definitely the final season for Scott Frost if he cannot figure things out. You know, what do you make of his tenure so far at Nebraska?
High expectations for Scott Frost when he comes over from UCF after having a great season with them. You know, that unbeaten season, that national championship season, as they call it. He accepts a job at his alma mater. You know, the people in Lincoln, they love their football team. They're always going to be excited for them. They're going to back this team no matter what. And they were thrilled to see a guy coming back who had been with the program in the past. And 15-29 is just not good enough so far through this. You know, yes, this team has heart. Yes, they play hard. Lost all 9 games by 9 points or less. They leave it all out on the field. But the record is just not good enough, and the wins are not very impressive either. He's beating mostly FCS teams and lower tier teams and struggling in the Big Ten. This has to be the year that they take a step forward, or Scott Frost is going to have to look for a new job.
Probably the best 3-9 team I've ever seen. You know, that's just, I don't know if that's a good statement or not. That's just, these guys played, like you said, so hard every week. Even against Ohio State, they're giving them problems. Looking at the offense, though, Casey Thompson comes over to replace Adrian Martinez from Texas. 2,100 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 9 picks. He also ran for 4 scores. Hudson Card was named the starter in week 1 for Texas, which I never understood. Thompson retook it, you know, a week later. Quick reads, you know, you get the ball out in a hurry, nice ball placement, anticipates, throws with confidence. You know, despite not having great strength, he plays hard, and he lays it out there all on the field. You know, Mark Whipple's starting to get his legs involved. What do you make of Casey Thompson, which I think is a, you know, pretty good replacement because the quarterback situation was not looking good on this roster?
I like Casey Thompson. You know, I think he's a solid player. 63.2 completion percentage last year, about 8.1 yards per attempt, 24 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. I think he's a solid quarterback. I think he's kind of what you need at Nebraska. You know, they weren't going to go out and get a superstar in the portal. That was just not really going to happen. It was not an attractive offer. So they get a guy like Casey Thompson who's a steady quarterback. He's not going to blow you away, but he's not going to make a whole lot of mistakes. He's good with the football, careful with the football, going to complete passes. I like him as sort of a stopgap. Maybe bring in some recruits in the future to take over the reins. I think this is a good fit for now.
This running game was pretty impressive last year, mainly off the heels of Adrian Martinez, who led the team in yards, touchdowns, carries. He did everything on the ground for them. But I think they have a really respectable backfield here. You know, they're pretty deep. They have no real game changers at first glance. But Anthony Grant is a JUCO transfer at 1,700 yards, started his career at Fort State. Contact friendly, he's very explosive. Makes him a Premier Johnson. I think you got a nice little duo here, 495 yards, 4.4 yards per catch. He's probably the shiftiest guy they have in this backfield. They also have Yance. He's pretty elusive for 245 pounds. Marquis Stepp, I believe he's still there. You know, he's kind of the power back. Irvin as well, Gabe Irvin. He wasn't great in the first 4 games, but he was big in pass protection before he got injured. So I like this backfield. Jacques Yance, that is. I forgot his first name, but he is the bigger back. And, you know, I think they got nice versatility here in this backfield, and I think that they should probably stick around the same despite losing Martinez's legs.
I think Anthony picking him up in the portal is a solid pick. I like JUCO transfers. They have a lot of experience playing solid ball. I like Johnson, you know, 4.4 yards per carry. It's just not quite where you want to be. Hopefully he takes a step forward. But he had four touchdowns on the ground in 10 games last year, about 500 yards on the ground as well. I think he's a solid back. I like the speed he possesses. I think that's solid. You know, I expect the running game to be heavy this year, like you said, with replacing Martinez, who was just such a great dual threat guy, kind of do everything he would want with his feet. I think the depth is good, though. They have 3 backs I think can really carry the load, split the load up between the 3 of them, and really provide some good opportunities for Nebraska.
I'm kind of interested about what they have at pass catcher as well. They lose the top 2 receivers, or, you know, pass catchers from a year ago. But Omar Manning's back, 6'4", 225, might find some time with the slot. Xavier Betts, you know, he was their second best recruit they landed last year. He's no longer with the team, so that's a big hit. Omar Brown, though, he was top-ranked prep school recruit. Coaches love him. You look at Trey Palmer, though, a big-time addition from Tennessee. You know, I was talking about some of these transfers I really liked. He is one of them. He brings plenty of speed to the table for them. Marcus Washington, they also just got him from Texas. Reunites him with Casey Thompson. Deep threat, a good route runner downfield. His speed allows him to get separation from the start. You know, he wins on comebacks. He's not afraid to go get the football. You know, at first I wasn't happy, at least in the spring, with this receiving core, but these 2 additions here at transfer I really like. And they also got another one from New Mexico State, Isaiah Garcia, Castanada. another guy who brings some speed, 500-plus yards last year, 15 yards per catch. Again, at first, it didn't look good, but I think they got a nice little core here to work with in 2022.
I like the way that Frost has hit the portal, brought some guys in that he needed to bring in. Omar Manning, I like what he can do. 380 yards receiving yards last year, good for 14.6 yards per catch, 2 touchdowns as well for him. I think he's a solid receiver. I like to see what he can do. I like the transfer portal work. I think this is solid. Trey Palmer is a very talented wide receiver. I expect him to take a huge step forward. And I like Garcia Castanada coming from New Mexico State. I think he has some potential. It's a guy maybe coming off the bench a little bit. Interesting to see what he can do.
Also, get fifth-year senior tight end Travis Olek. He replaces Austin Allen. That's going to be a tough replacement. They're pretty deep at tight end, at least looking at this depth chart. We'll see who can get involved as a pass catcher, but Allen, he was used big time last year for them. Chris Hickman, he also had 30 yards per catch on 3 grabs, so he had a solid impact for them. Overall, I like this pass catching group. The offensive line, though, it's kind of a middle-of-the-pack unit. One of the worst in pass protection. They lose 3 starters, and they just lost the 4th with Noureddin Noel being suspended due to a failed drug test. That's not good when you already lose a guy like Cam Jurgens on the interior. Very concerned about the O-line. Kevin Williams, though, 6'5", 330. He's versatile. He had Ben Hart back at right tackle. I think there's some potential there, 6'9", 330. And then Teddy Proshka, 6'9", 305. They got some really big and tall guys on this unit. They replaced a lot of beef from a unit that really was not that good a season ago.
Losing Noelle to drug test is very poor. You don't want to see that. It looked like he was going to be slotted into that left guard position to start there. The junior had some good experience. He's going to miss the season. I like what they have with this offensive line. It's not really going to wow you. It's not really full of that talent that you're hoping for. But I think it's a steady offensive line. 2 redshirt seniors that will lead the way in Hickson and Bando. I like the 2 of them together. I think they have some serious potential, and I like the right tackle and left tackle position. I think they're very set there. I think the talent is good enough, but it's just not really going to wow you and jump off the screen.
Looking at this defense, I thought this was really the backbone of the football team last year. They improved tremendously, up to 22.7 points per game allowed. The pass rush is quite awful, though, 12th in the Big Ten. That's not what you want to see. But Garrett Nelson, 6'3", 245. He was a star. 11 tackles for loss, 5 sacks. Caleb Tanner, another veteran coming back. I think big news for them, though, is O'Shawn Mathis comes over from TCU, a highly coveted recruit. Comes over from Fort Worth, great quickness, nice bend and dip. Reminds me a bit of Arnold Ebiketie. He was also a transfer. That's kind of why I made the comparison. But, his profile as a player also fits. Showcased a good spin move on occasion. 26.5 career tackles for loss, along with 12.5 sacks over the past 3 seasons. Ben Stilley, they lose him. Ty Robinson, he's been around for a few years now. They can play him in or out and has shown abilities in both areas. They lost Casey Rogers and Jordan Riley. They both went to Oregon. Nash Hutchmacher, 325 pounds. He has a lot of strength. I'm a big fan of this interior defensive line, mainly because of the 2 transfers they got. Stephon Wynn from Bama, 6'4", 299. Added him the same day they lost Rogers, so obviously they didn't hesitate one bit to replace the player they expected to do wonders for them. And then Devin Drew, he's strong, he has nice length, gets off blocks, really impressive lateral agility. He comes over from Texas Tech. How do you feel about this defensive line that I have some high expectations for this fall?
I definitely think there are some serious potential in this defensive line. I think they really fit well. I like the work they did in the portal. Mathis is a really talented player coming from TCU. I love his spin. I love his first step. I think he's a great player, good fit there. And they grabbed some solid guys who didn't really work out at their former schools who had the potential here to step up. I like to see what they can do. I'm not super impressed, but I think that the defensive line is definitely underrated in the Big Ten and has the potential to make some big moves.
They were not great versus the run last year. Penetration from the D-line mainly was just inconsistent, but again, they added some guys that move very well laterally, can help collapse. They also got good linebackers behind them they can lean on to clean up the dirty work. That's why I think Stephon Wynn and Devin Drew, these guys are going to be phenomenal impact players for them. I like what they got on this D-line. Hopefully, they do not disappoint me. Looking at linebackers, though, Henrik and Ramir, 109 tackles. Ramir, very good in coverage. Henrik was not bad either, 99 tackles. Chris Kolivark, he was a reliable rotational man, good tackler. I believe he's being moved to nickelback. So, depth isn't ideal here at this linebacking position. But Nick Henrik, Luke Ramir, I love what they got in these 2 guys. And I think overall this front 6, 7 is a really good starting point for this defense.
Ramir with 6 tackles for loss and a sack last year. Nick Henrik with 3.5 and a half a sack as well for him. I like the 2 of them together. When you return over 200 total tackles between 2 guys, that's really solid to get out of your linebackers. Both these guys produce. I like what they can do. They're solid leaders on the field. They have great game experience, both playing 12 games last year. I think these 2 linebackers will work very well together.
And having got the secondary, Travis Fisher sounds confident in this unit. He likes the energy, the competitive nature. Sucks Deontay Williams wasn't healthy, throughout his career, because I expected big-time things from him. I mean, he was a very talented player. Last year he showed it. Sucks his eligibility ran out. They're 54th in yards per game allowed, though. Kept everything in front of them. They They were 6th nationally in 20-plus passing yard plays allowed. Only 20, not, well, hold on. Oh, I don't know what the 29 is. They allowed only 4. They allowed 400-plus yards to Ohio State, but they had 2 INTs and had C.J. Stroud flustered the entire game. 7 was only the second time all year they were under 8 in a game, that being Ohio State. So, and the other game was Tulsa where they ran wild. So Nebraska really had Ohio State's number that day, it sounded like. Not completely because, Jackson Smith and Najigba had an afternoon, but for the most part, they did as good as you can against an Ohio State passing attack that was one of the nation's best.
I agree. The secondary is solid. I like what they do. These guys work hard. These are some of the hardest working players on the field for this Nebraska team. They put the effort in. They like to show off and do what they can do. Quentin Newsome, I think he's a solid player. I like to see what he can do. 11 games last year, 57 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, some pass breakups as well. I think he's a solid player. I like the fit with him. Marcus Buford as well. I like him as well. I think he's a talented player. He has potential to step up. Didn't play a whole lot last year.
Quentin Newsome is going to be joined by a handful of transfers. I talked about earlier how I love the transfers they got in all different facets of their roster. Kane Williams, a safety. He's a late addition from Alabama, 6'2", 205. He's instinctive. He has good ball skills. Could be used as a hybrid here. He spent a year of Saban, so he's obviously learned a lot. Tommy Hill, another transfer, former wide receiver, so he has good ball skills, nice speed and length. I think they're going to see him get slotted into the starting lineup this year. Omar Brown from UNI, underrated addition. Don't know much about him. The coaches seem to be high on him. Marquise Buford, 5'9", 190, another physical guy here, along with Jaden Gold, a physical player. He's a top-incoming freshman. Overall, I like what they got here. Isaac Gifford at slot, of course. I think this is a pretty good secondary, and I think overall this defense will continue to get better.
I think this defense will definitely improve. I like Gifford in slot. He's a player that I really like to see what he can do. Had a solid so far in the limited action he's get. Only played 6 games, but it looked good in those 6 games. 7 total tackles for him. I like to see this defense step up a little bit. I think they have the potential to. They weren't terrible last year, and I think they'll improve a lot this year.
Looking at the schedule preview and prediction, it's really tough to make any predictions considering how disappointing this team has been, but I think this is the year they really start to put it together. I really love the players they got in the portal. They got a good quarterback, 3 receivers really that they needed. Grant at running back, solid. The 3 guys on the defensive line, I think those guys will be impact players. And then a few adds in the secondary. Frost didn't go to the portal just to add, rotational linebackers or something. He added impact starters that they needed. I love that from him. And it shows that players still have confidence to come here to Nebraska and play despite the disappointment. First true road game comes October 7th. I have them winning at home against Oklahoma. Look, it's a must-win, or the fan base might just lose faith, even if they're coming into it 3-0. OSU isn't blown away with talent right now. I think the O-line might have some issues with that OU interior D-line of, Jeffrey Johnson, Jalen Redmond. But these matchups on both sides of the ball are not bad for Nebraska. Same goes for the Nebraska D-line against an Oklahoma O-line. It was kind of poor last year. So I think they're going to play hard. The crowd will be rowdy. I have them beating Oklahoma at home. They should have at least 5 or 6 wins, over this first 6. They could be at 6-0 like I have them. It's a brutal November, though. I have them losing to Purdue. The lack of pass rush, I think, will be the difference there. Losing 4 straight to end the year. I have a feeling they'll win at least one of those. I just don't really have the guts to pick it. But if they have a collapse at the end of the season like I have them predicted to do you think 7-5 is enough?
I just don't think 7-5 is enough for Nebraska at this point, considering that would still not put Frost at over 500 for his career. I think his time has just run out. They'd have to really wow a lot of people this year for him to keep his job. The schedule is tough. I definitely will give him credit there, but it's also, they're not playing Ohio State this year. They miss Ohio State. They miss Michigan State as well. So they definitely avoid some of the tougher teams in the Big Ten. He has to win 8 or 9 games. He wants to keep his job, in my opinion, especially if it's going to be a late season class like that. And I just don't see this Nebraska team winning anywhere close to that many games.
It's a brutal November slate, like I just said. They lost to all 4 of those teams last year by 7 points or less, so they can clearly compete. This is a 7 or 8 win team, in my opinion. I think it's very, very likely they win at least one of those games in November. And again, if I nail the schedule prediction exactly, which is a fun hypothetical situation because people will probably call it a failure, and that'd really start up the rumor mill to see if Scott Frost keeps his job. I think 7-5 would certainly be enough because they just have not shown any progress. I think last year was a nice little step in the right direction considering they didn't get blown out. They competed in every single game. You'd like to see them win. I think this year, if they can do that, especially at home against Oklahoma, I think that would be enough to keep his job for at least one more season. Nick, as always, appreciate you joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.